The stars burned cold above the Kellner system as Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the battleship Ironclad. Warning lights flashed across every console. Communication officers shouted coordinates and casualty reports. Through the massive viewport, she watched the distant glow of burning stations and dying ships. The Vraxian Horde had come. For 300 years, the galaxy had known peace. The Galactic Council had built its defenses on the Outer Rim. Automated weapons platforms, shield networks, early warning systems that could detect threats from 1,000 light years away. Everyone believed they were safe. Everyone believed the old wars were finished. They were wrong. The Vraxians emerged from the dark space between galaxies. They came in numbers that defied counting. Their ships were ugly things of black metal and pulsing organic matter. They did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They simply consumed everything in their path. The outer defenses had fallen in 6 hours. Helena received the reports with a face carved from stone. The Tovani defense grid was gone. The Calithian fortress world was burning. The Sundari fleet had retreated before firing a single shot. Species that had spent centuries building weapons and training soldiers had crumbled at the first sign of the enemy. Now only the human fleet remained. Commander James Park approached her station. His uniform was stained with oil, and his eyes were red from lack of sleep. He handed her a tablet showing the latest tactical display. The numbers were not good. The Imperial fleet had 47 warships. The Vraxian force approaching them numbered over 2,000. Behind them lay the jump gate to the inner colonies. 12 billion human lives depended on what happened in the next few hours. Helena looked at the display for a long moment. Then she handed it back. Her voice was calm when she spoke. Signal all ships. We hold this position until relief arrives or until we are destroyed. There is no retreat. Park nodded. He had served under Helena for 15 years. He knew she was not the kind of officer who made speeches for show. When she gave an order, she meant it. The communication went out across the fleet. Helena watched the responses come in from every ship. Not a single captain objected. Not a single crew member deserted their post. They knew what was at stake. They had signed up for exactly this moment. Across the fleet, men and women prepared for battle. Engineers ran final checks on reactor systems. Gunners loaded ammunition into railgun chambers. Medical teams set up trash stations in corridors that would soon be filled with wounded. Chaplains of every faith moved among the crew, offering words of comfort. On the destroyer Midnight Sun, a young weapons officer named Lisa Chun finished calibrating her targeting computer. Her hands were steady even though her heart raced. She thought of her daughter back on New Shanghai. The girl was only 5 years old. She would grow up never knowing her mother's face if this battle went wrong. But Lisa did not ask for a transfer. She did not look for an escape route. She simply locked her targeting solution onto the approaching enemy and waited for the order to fire. The Vraxian horde drew closer. Their ships moved without formation or strategy. They were like a swarm of insects driven by hunger alone. The largest vessels were kilometers long and studded with weapons that glowed with sickly green light. The smallest were barely larger than fighters, but came in waves that blackened the stars. Helena watched them come. She had studied the recordings from the fallen systems. She knew how the other species had reacted. The Torvani had tried to negotiate. They sent diplomats and peace offerings. The Vraxians had eaten them. The Calithians had relied on their shields. The shields had failed under the sheer weight of enemy fire. The Sundari had calculated the odds and decided survival was impossible. They ran without fighting. Humans would do something different. The first Vraxian weapons opened fire at extreme range. Green energy beams lanced across space toward the human fleet. Most shots went wide, but a few struck home. The cruiser Defiant took a hit to her forward armor. The metal glowed white-hot but held. The ship did not waver from her position. Helena's voice carried across every ship in the fleet. All batteries opened fire. The human fleet answered with thunder. Railguns hurled tungsten rounds at incredible velocities. Missile pods emptied their payloads into the void. Energy weapons carved bright lines through the darkness. The leading edge of the Vraxian swarm vanished in a storm of explosions. But more came behind them. Always more. The battle became a grinding nightmare of fire and death. Human ships held their formation with iron discipline. When one vessel took damage, her sisters moved to cover her. When guns overheated, crews worked frantically to bring them back online. When power systems failed, engineers bypassed safety protocols and pushed reactors beyond their limits. The destroyer Black Wolf lost her main engine to a direct hit. Her captain refused to abandon position. He ordered what remained of his crew to focus all power on weapons. The ship became a stationary fortress, pouring fire into the enemy until a Vraxian dreadnought tore her apart. The cruiser Morning Star rammed an enemy vessel 3 times her size. Both ships died together in a flash of nuclear fire. Escape pods launched at the last moment carried a handful of survivors to be picked up by their comrades. Hours passed. The human fleet bled. Ship after ship fell from formation. But every time a vessel died, she took dozens of enemy craft with her. The space around the defensive line became cluttered with wreckage. Vraxian corpses froze in the vacuum alongside human bodies. Helena never left her post. She directed the battle with a cold precision that amazed her officers. When the cruiser Redemption reported critical damage to her life support, Helena ordered her to fall back behind the line for repairs. When the battleship Fury asked permission to pursue a wounded enemy formation, Helena denied the request. Every ship had to hold position. Every gun had to face forward. The Vraxians did not understand what they were facing. In their long journey through the void, they had consumed hundreds of civilizations. Most had surrendered without fighting. Others had fought briefly before breaking and running. None had stood their ground like this. None had made them pay such a terrible price. Deep within the hive ships, the creatures that passed for Vraxian leaders began to feel something unfamiliar. They did not have a word for fear. They had never needed one. But watching their forces shatter against the human line, they began to understand why other species had invented such a concept. Commander Park brought Helena another report. His voice was hoarse from shouting orders. "Admiral, we have lost 18 ships. Ammunition reserves are at 30% across the fleet. The Vraxians have suffered approximately 400 confirmed kills." Helena nodded. The numbers were better than she had hoped. Time until the relief force arrives? 3 hours? Maybe 4. She looked at the tactical display. The Vraxian advance had slowed. They were no longer rushing forward in mindless waves. They were circling, probing, looking for weakness. The human resistance had confused them. Good. Helena opened a channel to the entire fleet. Her voice was tired but still strong. "All hands, this is the Admiral. I know you are exhausted. I know many of you have lost friends today. But look at what we have accomplished. The enemy expected us to break. They expected us to run like the others. Instead, we have made them afraid. We have shown them that humans do not surrender. We do not retreat. We fight until the last gun falls silent and the last heart stops beating. Hold the line for 3 more hours. Hold it for your families. Hold it for your species. Hold it because that is what we do." Across the fleet, crews answered with renewed determination. Damage control teams pushed themselves harder. Gunners found new reserves of energy. Medical officers saved lives that should have been lost. The Vraxians launched another assault. This time, they focused their attack on a single point in the human line. They threw hundreds of ships against 3 human cruisers. It was a sound strategy. Overwhelm one position and pour through the gap. But they had not counted on the stubbornness of human captains. The cruiser Vengeance took hit after hit. Her hull was torn open in a dozen places. Fires raged through her corridors. Half her crew was dead or wounded. But Captain Marcus Stone refused to withdraw. He ordered his remaining gunners to keep firing, even as escape pods launched around them. He stayed on his bridge until a Vraxian beam cut through the deck beneath his feet. His sacrifice bought time for reinforcements to plug the gap. 2 battleships moved to fill the space where Vengeance had stood. They poured fire into the Vraxian breakthrough force. The enemy vessels that had expected easy passage into human space found themselves trapped in a killing zone. Not a single one escaped. The hours crawled by. The human fleet shrank. The Vraxian horde thinned. Both sides bled into the darkness between stars. Then the sensors detected new contacts. Helena watched the display as signatures appeared on the edge of the system. For a moment, she feared the worst. More enemies. Another wave of the horde from some unexpected direction. Then the identification codes came through. The relief force had arrived. 300 human warships emerged from faster than light travel. They were fresh and fully armed. Battleships and carriers and destroyers in perfect formation. Behind them came troop transports carrying ground forces for the colonies that had already fallen. The Vraxians detected the new arrivals. They understood the mathematics of the situation had changed. They were no longer fighting a desperate handful of defenders. They were facing an entire Imperial battle fleet. For the first time in their existence, the Vraxian horde retreated. Helena watched them go. She felt no triumph. The cost had been too high for celebration. 23 ships destroyed. Thousands of crew members dead. Families shattered across a dozen worlds. But the line had held. When the relief force commander contacted the Ironclad, his voice was thick with emotion. Admiral Vance, the entire galaxy watched your stand. The Council species are already calling it the greatest act of courage in recorded history. Helena looked around her bridge. Her officers were slumped at their stations, exhausted beyond words. Medics moved among them, treating wounds and offering water. The smell of smoke and blood hung in the recycled air. "We just did our duty," she said quietly. That is all. But she knew it was more than that. Today, humanity had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten. Defenses could crumble. Technology could fail. Numbers could overwhelm. But courage and determination could hold a line when nothing else would. The stars burned cold above the Kellner system. The human fleet stood among the wreckage of their victory. And somewhere in the dark between galaxies, the Vraxian horde fled from creatures they had learned to fear. The defenders had not broken. The Imperial fleet had held the line,